Hello and welcome to The Exchange.
Today on the show, we will explore the serious and devastating effects domestic violence, particularly towards women, is having on our society. Maybe you know someone, or maybe you yourself are in a situation of domestic violence and don't know where to turn or are too fearful to.
Today we'll explore how to find hope in the midst of abuse.
Violence against women, along with domestic violence, continue to be one of the most persistent human rights violations in the world. Many cases go unreported for a variety of reasons. What are the barriers that stop women from seeking help? Where can women find hope in the cycle of abuse?
Joining us today is Annette Gillespie, who is the CEO of Women's Domestic Violence Crisis Service in Victoria. It's the only 24/7 statewide service for women and children experiencing domestic violence. Thanks for being here, Annette.
Oh, you're welcome.
Lovely to have you.
Yeah.
Tessa Jetson is a motivational speaker and author, but more importantly is a survivor of domestic abuse. Tessa has an amazing story of how she turned her life around. She has established the Tessa Jetson Foundation to raise funds to support women and children affected by domestic violence. Welcome, Tessa.
Thank you.
Now, Annette, let me address the first question to you. I note here that you've worked in family violence at an international level for about 20 years, so you obviously have a lot of experience. What is domestic violence? Could you define it for us and then talk about its prevalence?
So domestic violence is a pattern of behaviours to have power and control over another person in an intimate partner relationship. So that can include psychological violence, emotional abuse, physical violence and sexual assault as well.
And we hear a lot about it on the news. How prevalent is it in our society, or in Western society particularly?
We know that 1 in 3 women report a physical or sexual assault in their lifetime within an intimate relationship. It is the leading cause of illness or death in women aged 14 to 44 years in Victoria alone. It has bigger impacts on women than any other health determinant here in Victoria.
That is massive, isn't it? 1 in 3, and that's reported, of course.
That's reported, and it's often underreported.
Yeah.
So it's more likely to be 2 in 3 women that experience family violence.
Tessa, tell us about your experience with domestic violence.
Well, when I was 26 years old, I ended up in a women's refuge with 3 children, aged 1, 3 and 5 years old, after 3 years of very severe domestic violence, and had to end up going into hiding into a refuge, and I used the crisis line to get help.
And so life obviously is very different for you now. 20 years ago, was there much help available?
20 years ago, it was so different. It was very shameful to speak about it. So that's why I'm very passionate now speaking out, because for 10 years I actually hid my past to people. I was very ashamed of it and you just didn't speak out. It was just, I didn't tell anybody, and it's totally different now. Things are changing, and the more women that speak out, they can see that life can be fantastic. My life is amazing today, and that's why I'm very passionate to speak out to women.
You must have been very scared at the time, though.
It's terrifying when I look back. I was 26 years old and I was 23 at the time it started happening, and I had numerous restraining orders, at least 15, 20 restraining orders, and just nothing was really done, and I had to end up going to a refuge.
So was it the fear of speaking out, or was it the thought that people wouldn't believe you, the shame, or was it the fear of being...
It was just a really shameful thing back then, because there wasn't any TV commercials or anything to do. So you really, I got help from the police. I always rang the police, but I just, among your own friends and family, it was a very shameful thing to say. Like, it just wasn't done back then. Like, for 10 years I didn't speak about it.
And among the authorities, Annette, is it taken seriously nowadays?
Oh, it is taken more seriously nowadays. We work very closely with police and the court system, and we have high-risk panels to identify those women who are highest at risk. So we do work very closely with statutory organisations such as Child Protection as well, and people are taking it more seriously.
At what point in the abuse scale is it classed as domestic violence, Annette?
Well, it's certainly from the Women's Domestic Violence Crisis Service perspective. It is domestic violence when one person is in fear of another person's behaviour within an intimate relationship. So that can mean whether it's psychological or physical. Right. And often people think about physical violence, but actually women tell us that it's the emotional abuse that is more difficult to deal with.
So can you define emotional abuse? Just give us some sort of example maybe of what you're talking about there.
So it could be put-downs, name-calling. Often women are told that they're stupid or useless. So it erodes away at the confidence of women, and it tells them that they're often not worthy, that other people wouldn't want them. They're very lucky to have the person that they're with, and that's an intentional pattern of behaviour.
And does it go undetected more if it's emotional than if it's physical? I mean, if it's physical and you're walking around with bruises, people can see.
Very obvious, isn't it? Yeah.
But if it's emotional, does it ever go unresolved and just people just put up with it?
Well, often one of the tactics is for the perpetrator of the violence to blame the woman who's experienced the violence and to make her feel like it's her fault. So she can often become very confused about what's happening in the relationship, and she might feel that she's responsible for why the relationship isn't going well. And so when it's emotional abuse, often the woman thinks that she is to blame for that and really doesn't understand what's happening in the relationship. So sometimes doesn't seek support.
Sure. Was that your experience, Tessa? Were you in denial about it, or what was your? How did you feel when it first started happening?
Yeah, well, I met my children's father when I was 16, and it was all normal for about 7 years till he became a very severe drug addict, and he became very abusive, extremely abusive, and he did exactly that. It started. I really felt worthless. I was even going to go and get plastic surgery and everything, like the things he would say to me. So, and I did feel like it was my fault towards the end. It's a crazy cycle, like you're so brainwashed.
And really you were very young and impressionable as well at the time.
It's amazing. Like, you were together for 7 years, and obviously it was a good relationship for most of those 7 years. So you must have been quite surprised when
it happened. Just all of a sudden, and become very violent from the drugs. And I knew immediately I was leaving, but it took a 3-year period of going into hiding, changing addresses, getting restraining orders until I had to move anonymously somewhere till it stopped.
And you feel safe now, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there a big misconception about the attitudes of people towards those who are experiencing domestic violence?
Well, the public tend to think, again, that the woman is somehow responsible for the violence that she is experiencing. Often we...
Really? That's still prevalent?
Yes, it's still prevalent that there is a lot of women blaming. So in other words, it might be she must be doing something to irritate him.
I'm absolutely gobsmacked at that.
Yes.
We'd like to think that it was different, but the reality is that many people still think that, you know, why don't women just leave? Why doesn't she just do what makes him happy? So there's lots of occasions where women are held responsible for the violence. We very rarely hear people saying, why doesn't he just stop the violence?
And is it socially? Is it we tend to have this idea that it happens in lower income earning areas? Is that a correct view, or is that misconception? Maybe
that's a complete misconception. No, we know that family violence has no discrimination. It doesn't matter where you're born, what family you're born into, what education level, what ethnicity. The rates of family violence in population are the same. So the single common denominator is that you're born female. That's the risk.
And is there any more risk factors for a female in that, I mean, you know, some women listening would just quite categorically say, I just wouldn't put up with that. What makes one person put up with it and one person not put up with it, would you say, Annette?
I think it's not about I wouldn't put up with it. What happens in relationships is that women have bottom lines and that those bottom lines can shift. So often we might say, I wouldn't put up with that, but actually when it does happen, we rethink the relationship and often compromise. I don't think that's uncommon at all for women to do that and to continue shifting the bottom line, which then gives the message to the perpetrator that they do have control.
Would you agree with that there's a difference in bottom lines of what people are prepared to accept, Tessa?
Yes, and also there's other issues as well, like the fear. I was just going back in my mind then, like sometimes it was so fearful not knowing where he was. Like, it's easy was sometimes to know that he was in the house and walking around stalking me and not knowing where he is. It's terrifying. So there's other issues as well, and like women really, I wanted to leave. I did want to leave, but it's not that easy. Like people think it's easy just to take 3 children, but when you've got nowhere to go and you've got no money, and also you're in fear of your life.
Yes.
And there's waiting lists for women's refuges as well. So it's like, where do I go?
Yeah.
I used to go to people's house and he would break into them, and then I couldn't go there anymore.
And they wouldn't want you back
No.
and all of that.
Blow up the cars and all the long stuff.
Well, it's a fascinating discussion. We'll come back with a little bit more in just a moment. Also, Street Talk coming up right after this.
Why do you think domestic violence in our society, particularly against women, occurs?
I think mainly because of alcohol abuse. I really think that's contributes a lot to it.
I can't say why I think it occurs, but I definitely have a theory around what I think needs to happen in order to stop it. I personally was in an abusive relationship, and I felt when I got out of it that I had so many support networks around me that I could talk about it, that it would ensure I wouldn't get into a relationship again. Whereas with the guys, they don't have that. If they want to talk about that to someone, they're going to be judged about it, and so they don't have that same network where they can go, look, this is what I'm doing, how do I stop?
I think that the violence towards other people that I've experienced, and I was attacked once, not as part of a relationship, but just, it's something that happens because people feel that they can take advantage of someone. They have more rights than than they're actually entitled to.
I think it occurs in all environments, but the environment we live in at the moment can be very claustrophobic, especially if we live in towns. That's not to say it doesn't happen in the countryside, because it does in the UK, especially because of loneliness. People feel left out.
Frustration, maybe men not being able to deal with verbalisation with women.
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons, but I think a lot of it is our way of life today, and stresses and pressure, money and job loss and things like that. And I think some men just like to have power over women.
Do you think there's one underlying root cause, or there's many reasons?
I think there's many, and it goes across all stratas. I think there's many. But I think often men do get, in certain areas, get frustrated with women, and to keep them quiet, maybe if they're a bit too verbal, they get picked on.
Could be anything. It could be drug related or alcohol or anything really.
A lot of it is money worries, I suppose, as well, but I think with alcohol is the worst that I know of anyway.
Because there's this, again, the culture of machismo, this ultra masculine culture that we've all grown up with, the John Waynes and the Arnold Schwarzenegger's kind of thing, where we don't actually live up to that anymore. No, we never did. It's not actually real. So perhaps that's leading to frustration, or leading to some form of needing to exert power over someone else.
Welcome back. We're discussing how, as a society, we can prevent domestic violence against women. And we have Annette Gillespie and domestic violence survivor Tessa Jetson. And we're welcoming Sandra Cavallo, our Street Talk reporter. Hi.
Hi,
Sandra.
good to be here.
Yeah.
Some interesting conversations and some common thoughts out there.
Yeah, and lots of varied thoughts, I think, in terms of the causes and why do men lash out, or why is it actually happening. I couldn't find one particular cause. It seemed to be quite varied, whether it's alcohol, whether it's because...
A lot of discussion around stress.
Yep, stress as well, and pressures in cities particularly. I know I picked that up, the fact that we're living in more dense communities, whether that's creating stress. But the thing that fascinated me was the last comment about whether we're living in a society that's ultra machismo, and whether that's the case. I'm just be fascinated to know if that's a contributing factor.
Well, we certainly know that domestic violence is a gendered crime, and we know that because the majority of men, the perpetrators of domestic violence are men, and the victims are women, and that doesn't matter where you are in the world. Some of the other myths we can dispel is we know that domestic violence was occurring before today's society. We know many women who said that they lived in violent relationships, but there was nowhere to go 20 or 30, 40 years ago.
So they just stayed.
So they stayed in relationships. We also know that there are lots of people who drink alcohol, take drugs, who do not become violent, and that there are lots of people who are violent towards their partner who are not violent towards other people in their lives. And so that is intentional choice of behaviour that they use in certain circumstances.
Yeah. And frustration was mentioned quite a few times as well, drugs, alcohol. Obviously that was the case with...
Yeah, I want to touch on that again because there's still no excuse. Like, it is an excuse, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, because I do believe my children's father had a presupposed something in him that brought it out. Like, it's still an excuse. There is no excuse. Whether you've got stress, you've got no money, doesn't matter. Like, everyone goes through these things in life. There's no excuse to hit a lady. End of story.
True. Yeah. Very well said. I thought it was interesting, again, getting back to the whole macho thing that, you know, John Wayne and Arnold Schwarzenegger got to blame in all of that. And I don't think you ever see any of their movies where they're actually behaving in that way.
Towards a woman?
Toward women? No, I know, they blow up everything else.
Bringing that into line, though, is there any ethnicities in which it appears more or less, or is it right across the board? I mean, would we, if we saw the cases, would we be surprised?
It occurs right across the board, so it doesn't matter where you're born in the world or what culture you're born into. There is a prevalence of domestic violence in intimate relationships where there is a male partner and a female partner.
So in the case of, say, Australia, where we technically have equal rights for women and men, I say that tongue-in-cheek, is it more or less prevalent in areas where, or cultures where there wouldn't be the equality that we are supposed to be grateful for here in Australia?
Well, I think that the key part that you say there is tongue-in-cheek, because we don't have equality between men and women anywhere in the world, including Australia. And we know that it is the gender inequalities. And
so what is that? What is the root cause of that? What's the root cause that is causing this violence?
Well, the root cause is the unequal distribution of power and resource that leads to a sense of entitlement that men have over women. And we've seen that in our social structures over time, where women were at one time, through law, the property of women. And so it's something that's been handed down historically, a sense of entitlement from men to have women as chattels, as property, and we see that being played out in relationships today.
One of the interesting things I heard was if men had an opportunity to chat through what they were going through, and we often hear that men don't chat, they don't talk about their problems, but if they started to, would that start to change the numbers of violent cases towards women?
Well, we know that one of the things that we can do to support women is to develop the understanding of what we call bystanders to the violence. So the mates of men who can challenge men about men's behaviour, that can be successful. So it's a case of saying, hey mate, that's just not okay to be doing that. That can be really successful. We know, and I've facilitated men's programs many years ago, and we know that one of the key motivators for men is when they understand the impact on their children that they're having. The challenge is to get them to understand that impact, but once they do, that can motivate change as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think we guys, if I can just say, you know, in defence of being the only male here, that we guys, some of us are getting better at the whole communication, getting together with each other and talking through our problems. Anyway, Sandra, thank you for hopping in, and we'll be back with more in just a moment. You're on The Exchange. Welcome back. We're chatting with Annette Gillespie and Tessa Jetson about how we can prevent domestic violence against women.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. Tessa, we were talking about the effect on children. What effect did your situation have on your own family, your own children?
My older son actually had to do some counselling, and my daughter actually, in the teenage years, as well. It does affect the children. I had 3 years of counselling myself. So it's a lot of stress, a lot of, you know, obviously life's never the same. And it's hard, you know, like it's very hard for the children not growing up in a family with their father, but we've done our best now. Years of hard work, and now my 3 children are all grown up and they're all really grounded, beautiful people, and I'm really proud that they'll never pass this pattern
because
on.
they understand the issues behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you feel like you've broken the cycle in your own family
100%.
by standing up 20 years ago.
Yeah, my son, I've just become a grandmother, and
lovely.
I'm so proud of my son. I cannot express, that's the most biggest achievement of my life, to see my son just be a caring, loving father. That's the best thing you could want in life.
That is so good. Now, earlier in the program, you mentioned about educating men. And especially, I was interested in what you said in regard to if men understand the impact of this on their children, they're more likely to change their behaviour. Would you like to comment a little bit more on that and the whole educational process?
It's really important that men understand the influence they have over other men's behaviour. And so we're just asking men just to pitch in with us, to work together and help us spread the message around not being violent towards women.
So if they hear of a mate or a family member, whatever, say, hey, buddy, it ain't okay.
It's right, yeah, it's not okay, and there is help available.
Yep.
I know that in Australia we have a National Depression Day where Anti-Depression Day, where they have T-shirts that say, you know, are you okay? Are we doing anything on a massive way to try and educate communities by saying it's actually not okay?
There are some national campaigns, and we have a new foundation for the prevention of violence against women set up. So there are some initiatives, and we're looking to change behaviour for generations to come.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And you've got some great resources available too, I believe. So where can people go if they find themselves in a situation of domestic violence? What action should they take?
Well, the first thing that women can do is contact our 24-hour, 7 days a week crisis service.
Yeah, in saying that, I believe we have one.
That's right. There is one for the state, yes.
That doesn't sound like a lot.
No, there are times where we need more resource in order to respond adequately to women, but we can always ensure that we will take the steps to get women to a place of safety. From there, they can get safe accommodation, they can get support to assist them with housing, financial support, but more importantly, just to understand what's happening for them in the relationship and to provide them with the different options that they need to go forward safely without violence.
And Tessa, from your own experience, for women watching this program right now, what would you say to them?
I'd say leave. There is help there now. There wasn't years ago. I actually have set up some free workshops. So if anyone wants to go to my website, tessajetson.com.au, I've got all the links for all the resources what were mentioned. Plus I run free workshops. You can ask me any questions. I'm more than happy. I'm passionate. This is what I do. I'm more than happy. Sometimes someone contacts me, business women, all different kinds of women, and it makes the difference to leave, so they can contact me as well.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. I hear you're writing a book?
Yes.
Right.
I'm writing a book about my journey, but the second half of the book is about how I turned it around through all the things that I've done, the counselling, but also getting into self-development.
So leaving people with hope and some good news. Wonderful. Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time on the exchange today. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
And I believe this is going to be a real help to a lot of women who are watching the exchange, and also to guys as well.
Yes,
to
definitely.
say it's not okay. Yeah. So thank you for watching. Please go to our website for a fact sheet as well as more information about our show. I hope you can join us next time.
See you then.